All right, so we're off to the races. So I'm Rebecca Snyder, Executive Director of the Maryland Delaware DC Press Association, and you are here for our legislative update. We will kind of walk through the pending legislation in Maryland and Delaware. There's not too much going on in DC. There is an anti-compete provision that's grinding through, but that's not something that we normally weigh in on. So if you guys have questions, we are a small and collegial group. So jump in when you have questions, or if you have more information that I don't have. So I wanted to kind of talk about some of the big chunks of issues that we work on as an organization. And, you know, MDDC is active in all three of our jurisdictions legislatively, but the most seems to happen in Maryland, for better or for worse. So around sort of journalism and access, or those general issues, we've got a couple things happening in Maryland. House Bill 308, Senate Bill 162 is revisions to the anti-SLAPP statute. This is a bill that we have been pushing, oh my goodness, for like the past 6 years. This is by far its strongest version. It will provide for some somewhat discretionary fee shifting for complaints. It removes Maryland's dreadful bad faith provision that one has to pass to be considered a SLAPP suit. So it's a really strong step forward. It has passed the House. It's back in the Senate Judicial Proceedings Committee. Bear with me for just a second. One of our people are looking for a let's see, for our link to get in, so I want to make sure we're set there. So it's stuck in judicial proceedings. Let's see, and which a lot is stuck in judicial proceedings, which is a Senate committee that is also looking at a police reform, a big police reform initiative in Maryland. So look at email. Sorry, let me just do two things at once. And I'm getting older, so I can't do it very well, two things at once. Our next sort of big thing on the journalism hit parade is revisions to the Public Information Act in Maryland. That's House Bill 183. That bill is sealed and done and on its way to the governor. And this is like a huge proactive win for us, and will strengthen alternative dispute procedures for Public Information Act disputes. So if you may remember that back in 2015, the first major reform to the PIA passed, and it created the Office of the Ombudsman, who I like to think of as the whisperer between custodians and requesters trying to resolve disputes. It also created the Public Information Act Compliance Board, which could rule on disputes about fees, and fees only at $350 or above. So what House Bill 183 does for us is it expands the jurisdiction of that Public Information Act Compliance Board to hear pretty much anything except fee waivers that got dropped in negotiations. So they can hear everything but fee waivers, and they can make binding and enforced decisions. Okay. So that is a huge win.
I had a question.
And go ahead, Brian. What did you want to say?
My question on that fee waivers, are we still going to go back at it? Because that is sometimes very cost prohibitive to smaller organizations. Is that something that will be
believe
attacking?
me, yes, we will, because honestly, I choked a little bit when that was dropped. We had some strong negotiations between the University of Maryland system, or I guess the University System of Maryland, and advocates. And so the fee waiver provision was something that that we had to give up. We also have pushed back implementation to 2022, so it's delayed by a year. However, we'll go back at fee waivers, and that's something that advocates like the Public Justice Center are really invested in as well. So we'll have a good team in getting to those. And we felt like there was still enough in that bill just to kind of enlarge the scope was the first step, and then picking up fee waivers as a natural next step.
What's the pushback on fee waivers from the legislature?
They were thinking, it wasn't from the legislature, it passed unanimously in the House and Senate, but it was really other advocates who felt like there would be so many disputes around fee waivers that it would drive up their costs. Honestly, I kind of felt like it was a red herring, that they just didn't want the bill to pass and were throwing up obstacles. But you know, those are my opinions, and it now is off to the governor for signature, and we don't have any reason to expect that he would not sign the bill. So that'll be exciting things happening in 2022. The other thing that I wanted to just bring up is House Bill 670. It looks like I forgot to put in that's the police reform bill. You may hear it as Anton's Law. That is part of the police reform package that's grinding its way through the House and Senate. It will go to conference committee, and just a little civics lesson, you know, a bill has to pass both the House and Senate in the same posture for it to go to be signed into law. If you have bills that don't quite match up, they go to something called a conference committee, which is like the proverbial back room where deals get made and then are passed by both House and Senate. And we are in the time of the legislative season in Maryland, which ends April 12th. We are in total countdown mode where all of those kind of deals happen. So right now, 670, what you all need to know from a journalism perspective is that police officer internal affairs records will be right now are subject to the PIA. They're classified as investigatory records. And everybody knows that investigatory records are one of the most overused exemptions out there. So It's not like a free pass for anyone, but it does kind of put those records from personnel, which are always locked up tight, to investigatory, which you have a hope of getting. It also right now has a provision that a police officer cannot expunge their records unless, they were found not guilty or unfounded or tossed out, which is not great for us, but it's setting that precedent of you shouldn't expunge. So I'm not quite sure how that will wind up. I don't think anybody really knows necessarily, but that's where we are on that initiative. And then I just also wanted to bring up that former Senator Sarah Feeney from Western Maryland has been asked to chair the STAR Commission, which looks at transparency for quasi-public bodies. We were asked to testify before the commission week or two ago, and I'll be following that in the interim because those recommendations will turn into legislation next year. All right, any questions or anything that anybody wants to add in this subject area? All right, so let's move on to business issues. This has been an extraordinarily spicy session for us in terms of those business issues. So we'll start in Maryland and let you know that the digital ad tax, which passed last year, was vetoed by the governor, was overridden by the legislature in March, and will go into effect theoretically. I know that's a lot and it's complicated. The digital advertising tax now also has a bill, Senate Bill 787, that would provide an exemption to that tax for local media. So it would mean that our news media outlets, broadcasters would be exempt from from having to charge the tax. And just as a little refresher, the digital ad tax is a tiered taxation for the entity that is selling a digital ad. And of course, digital advertising is a really spongy, ever-changing concept. So it could be everything from native advertising to banner ads to e-newsletters and things like that. We fought it really hard because now Maryland is the first state in the union to pass a digital advertising tax, and it is spreading like wildfire. So locally, or I guess in our general region, West Virginia is contemplating this is because they want to get rid of their income tax, but they are contemplating taking out the sales tax exemption for digital advertising, which is almost the same as putting a digital ad tax in. There is legislation, oh gosh, in like 10 states, and it really is, everyone's kind of looking at Maryland in this respect because Maryland was the first. And so it was very important to us to get this local media exemption through. We still
Rebecca,
feel like that's well in hand. It ran into a little bit of a bobble with the federal stimulus payments that you couldn't reduce a tax. A state couldn't reduce a tax and still receive their stimulus payments or stimulus funds. But that's been that seems to have been rectified, and this initiative is being pushed and shepherded by the Senate president. So it's not like it's not going to pass. Around digital advertising, just to also let you know, there is a legal challenge that's been filed. We are not a part of that. None of our members are a part of that, as far as I know, to challenge the concept of the digital advertising tax on a couple different levels. It's happening on the federal level. There's also supposed to be a district challenge, which hasn't yet been filed. Y'all with me so far? Or did I just?
Nope.
Becca, I have a question for you. This is Joe. Senate Bill 787, the local media exemption. Can you expand a little bit on what or how they identify local media? How do they determine what local media means? Because just like the Washington Post, our print is local, but our digital is not. So I was curious if you might be able to expand on that a little bit.
Okay, and that's a great question, and you'll get the this document, this slideshow with all the hot links. Can you all see Senate Bill 787 right now?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so we created in collaboration with the broadcasters and our very own Jim McLaughlin, fabulous legal mind of MDDC, we created exemption language that we felt covered all of our members. So you can see, and just a little bit about how legislation works. If it's all caps and bold, it means it's being added to a bill. So there's the broadcast definition, and here's news media entity. So we wanted, rather than to focus on like the who, we wanted to focus on the activity of journalism, basically.
Smart.
News media entity, for those of you who can't see it, means an entity engaged primarily in the business of news gathering, reporting, or publishing articles or commentary about news, current events, culture, or other matters of public interest. So it specifically carves out aggregators and republishers of third-party content. So we felt like wherever your
Can I just add something, Rebecca?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, it carves out aggregators or republishers if you are primarily an aggregator or republisher. So if you do a little bit of aggregating, like morning mix type stuff, here's some interesting news from over the weekend or whatever, that wouldn't be enough. It'd have to be like that's your main business is not actually reporting, but just aggregating other people's content. So we should all be covered by this exemption.
Yeah, thank you for that, Jim. And so now we also feel like, we did some philosophical soul searching on this. So now we have a definition of news media entity that we feel comfortable with, and we can trot out if we would need it.
Can I ask a quick question, Rebecca,
Yeah.
to Jim? Hey, Jim, what, who, when we're the carving out the aggregators, who specifically would that describe?
I think it would describe, honestly, I don't know of a site offhand that it would describe. That language came from the legislature. They were really focused on people who don't actually do journalism, but just aggregate links to other people's journalism.
Like,
I mean, I know there are some sites that basically, for want of a better word, steal our content, and I suppose it would apply to them. But I'm confident that any of the members of MDDC easily qualify as a news media entity.
Yeah.
My interest, of course, would be if they try to identify a member of the MDDC and use it against them.
Right.
I'm glad
we would have to push back hard against that. I don't think that that's what they had in mind.
No, it's not.
And I don't think the definition would cover us, because that's not our primary. Republishing other people's content is not our primary business.
And I like that the primarily is what, because
Yeah.
what we intend and what we see today may not be necessarily in the future what they decide to use the language for, but the insertion of the word primarily gives you a definition that would be very difficult for them to manipulate to go after a legitimate journalistic enterprise.
Yeah, that was our thinking.
Yeah.
And I'd rather not have this at all, frankly, but it was one of those things where they had like a, they felt like they needed this language in there somehow. And I mean, I guess it could even in theory apply to like a social media platform, because it doesn't engage in its own reporting. So maybe that's where it's really driving.
I think that's where they were getting at. They were trying to lock it up tight so that Facebook can't say, well, no, we're a content provider
entity, because we do 2%. Yeah, we have 2% of our content is this little Facebook team or something,
Yeah, right.
Maybe.
Okay, so now we're back to business issues. You all back on the correct screen these days? So the one other thing I wanted to just touch on is another bill that passed, was vetoed, and then was overridden this session, is the sales tax on digital products. That was something that we decided not to weigh in on last year, primarily because our newspaper subscriptions are already taxed. And so it seemed, like obviously we prefer not to have a tax on our subscriptions digitally, but it was hard to make a case on that, and we really focused on other things. So the comptroller has come out with guidance on that topic. The one thing you guys do need to know, we're working on toning down that guidance a little bit, because it does right now cause some consternation for people who are doing online educational webinars and seminars. So I would urge you to take a look at the comptroller's guidance on it. For I would say the majority of our members, you're just charging tax on your subscriptions like you do for your paper subscriptions. You're moving on. There are some clauses on ad agencies. So some of our members have standalone ad agencies that will be required to charge tax for some of their products. So definitely take a look at that. But it's the comptroller is working through that. Oops, sorry. Woo. Another business issue I just want to flag for you all, the two that are that may affect you and just kind of pay attention to. The Essential Workers Protection Act. There's been a couple bills that have gone through Maryland right now that are really looking at how to protect essential workers during states of emergencies and so forth. So House Bill 581 would have, and a lot of this has been amended out, and we're not quite sure where it'll wind up. But it started off saying any essential worker had hazard pay of, $3 an hour more during any state of emergency. And let's not forget, it doesn't always feel like the government recognizes that press is essential workers, but we are listed as essential workers. So this could hit our businesses, even if we have people working from home and doing different things. So right now, this bill has been kind of watered down to be a prospective look, to not have hazard pay factored in there as a mandate. But it is something we don't really weigh in on those types of things, because the chamber and business groups do a really good job of hollering about those pieces, but I do pay attention. So that's still coming on down. The one thing we will have to pay attention to, not right now, but probably next session, is this concept of environmental producer responsibility. You can see in New York, actually, it's getting a lot of traction. They have kind of I would say a bad bill they call it EPR. And basically what it means, and it kind of is targeted more towards the soft drink industry and junk mail and so forth. But it basically at heart is, if you produce consumer waste, you have to clean it up. Philosophically, I think it's kind of nice. We all have been suckered into the Make America Beautiful campaigns that put the responsibility for litter at the feet of consumers, when we don't, as consumers, you don't decide how something gets packaged. And these types of bills are kind of a new wave. They're very popular in Europe. Canada has one that say, okay, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, you're responsible for making sure that your cans come back in some way. And so that's where you get bottle deposits and things like that. House Bill 36 was what's known as a conversation starter. So it wasn't meant to go anywhere. It didn't go anywhere. Delegate Learman, who actually was instrumental in our sponsor and instrumental, worked so hard on our Public Information Act bill. She is also the sponsor of this EPR bill. She knows that it would affect newspapers adversely, because we would be responsible for basically paying into a system that would work to recycle newspaper. And she is willing to exempt newspapers or figure out a way to work through it. I bring it up here because this is sort of a big picture issue that we'll have to deal with as time goes on. And if especially some of your press lines are producing direct mail, catalogs, things like that, it could hit you in a variety of ways. We'll work closely with the magazine publishers on this and other advocates. So it's not an issue now. It will be an issue in the future. So that's business in Maryland. You all with me so far?
So far.
All right. So Delaware this is something we don't really ever weigh in on, but Delaware is going to pass its minimum wage increase this session. And they are, and just a note about Delaware, they are in their Easter break. They'll come back on Tuesday. Their session goes till the end of June. So we do expect, that fight for 15 to go. It'll be phased in. And that's just wanted to make you aware. All right, moving on. Foreclosure and public notice issues. I do want to make you all aware that our public notice website has had a soft launch. We went with Column as a vendor to display our public notices. You can take a look at it there. It's much cleaner. It's much more attractive. And I'm pretty sure that everybody has now, most everybody has started to upload their notices. We're tracking down a few people who are not. This website is critical. And here I'm going to start in Delaware because that's where our heat is right now. That Senate Bill 91 is a bill that would move all the family court notices. So like in Delaware, that's divorces, guardianship, adoptions, those types of things. This bill would move all of those notices to an aggregated courts website. I have a meeting next week with the bill sponsor and a representative from the family court to talk through this. And my main claim to fame is to say, you don't need to do this. We're already doing it at no public cost here on our aggregated public notice site. And I need to be able to honestly say that all of our members in Delaware are uploading their notices, or else it's hard to say that we're comprehensive. So we are going to fight the Delaware, that Senate Bill 91 bill, really strongly. It is a significant chunk of change for many of our members. It also hits into the public's right to know, like on our most vulnerable members of society, which tend to be children. We need to know what's going on in that arena. So more to come on that. In Maryland, lots of bills pushing moratoriums on foreclosure or providing relief to homeowners. There's some bills that are circulating about holding some properties back from tax sale, like if you're, this was last year, but in the same vein of, if you owe something on your water bill, your property can't go to tax sale, those types of things. Those pieces in terms of, timing of foreclosure, timing of tax sale, we stay silent on because they don't change how notice is served. We don't really have a dog in the fight. But there is, in fact, like everybody's hurting because there are no foreclosures right now in terms of publication. So just be aware that that's out there. The two public notice bills that we had in Maryland have kind of died down. Oh, I'm sorry, that's not Senate Bill 787. It is Senate Bill 305, House Bill 79. Dorchester County filed a bill to change the definition of newspapers. This was ostensibly to get around or help them with a timing issue in terms of publication. They wanted to have a backstop that they could use the online version of a newspaper of record if necessary. The way the bill was drafted, and I think partly it was because it's a really inexperienced bill drafting staff. They just added online newspapers as being the same as papers of record. So that has died in committee. I would expect that the problem is not completely solved. We tried to work specifically with the Dorchester County Council to come up with a compromise, which did what they said they wanted to do. They rejected it. So I can't imagine that it won't come back, but we'll work on that in the interim. The other bill that deals with public notice in Maryland was Delegate Shetty's House Bill 39, which allows a judge to waive the publication requirement for name changes. This was a bill that came up, actually this is its third year. It would have passed last year, save for the pandemic. When it came up in year one, we very narrowly, we worked with the sponsor to tailor it. And it's really coming out of basically the domestic violence community and the transgender community, where there are physical threats to safety around publication of name changes. So that was a fight that we decided was not one that was worth spending the political capital to win, and I don't think we would have won it. And so that has not yet fully passed, but it will. Any questions on what's happening in Maryland and Delaware around public notice? Oh, and so that's pretty much our big set of issues. So you've got the journalism issues, business issues, foreclosure, public notice. I do want to let you know we're still super busy here at MDDC. The Maryland session is going to end April 12th. So you'll see a legislative update from me after the session closes and the dust settles. Delaware is going to continue going on until the end of June. And you will see in the next, maybe today, maybe next week, we'll be announcing the winners of our contest. And look for our awards program. It'll run in episodes, May 3rd through the 7th, published on YouTube like we did last year. And we've got a terrific, terrific session for Into the Newsroom planned throughout the summer. We're teaming with the University of Maryland for some skill building sessions. And we're also working with the Delaware Community Foundation, who's also running an internship program, to do some additional programming. So pretty much every week throughout the summer, there will be training from one of those two programs. So I'll send you information on that as it becomes available. Happy to answer any other questions you might have. Always just touch base if you're worried about something or thinking about something, and I'll help you as best I can.